People have had to drill holes in rock and concrete for a long time, and there are evidence of ancient people, Incas and others, drilling very perfect cylindrical holes in solid stone, and I don't know how they did that. But if we just take the folk song from the 19th century, John Henry drilling holes for the railroad with a double jack, one in each hand, and his shaker with a star drill, turning it in between the blows. That's what a rotohammer does in a small scale. It hits and turns, just like John Henry and his shaker. But the problem is we don't need now to drill holes this big in most of the work we do. We need to drill sometimes some little holes, maybe in some porcelain tile, in an expensive shower, or hanging a picture, or a tapcon to hold up something on your patio. And you need to drill holes that range from what, 1/8 of an inch to maybe, worst case scenario, 3/4 of an inch. Let me show you the tools that I figured out are well suited to a job like that in the 21st century. So I'm going to give you an overview. I've got 3 different types of rotohammers here, ranging from the Baby Bear, which is just a Jacob's chuck that holds a straight shanked drill bit. In this case, I think that's probably 1/8 inch, and the set goes down even smaller than that for light work in the house, fussy work. Coming up through SDS and SDS plus shank, that refers to the connection point, up to this big bad boy, which is a spline shanked Milwaukee demolition hammer, rotor hammer. Going to talk about the capacities, the applications, and what might be that you would want to have if you had to have a one-size-fits-all general solution to drilling holes in hard substrate. So this little rigid cordless belongs to my son-in-law, Ben Brewster, best son-in-law in the world, by the way. And I actually had to borrow this from him about a month ago, and I bought him this set of bits because I needed that. I needed that 1/2 inch hole in a tight clearance out on my gate. I couldn't get my Bosch Bulldog in the space, and I knew he had that little bad boy. Now, once you're used to, a real tool, something like this is a frustration, but it'll do the work. It has a hammer setting, it has a drill setting, but the advantage is you can walk into somebody's granite shower and this minimizes the impact and maximizes the turning, so you're not near as likely to shatter a thin piece of tile or, stone or something expensive and brittle. When you've got to be really careful, you use light pressure, high speed, and baby the hole into the material. So there's a rule in construction that the bigger the work, the more the money, right? I mean, a bigger, heavier tool costs more money, and it's certainly the case with these, because for the price of one SDS plus 1 inch diameter, by the way, 1 1/8 is a max size on these, for the price of that bit, you could probably buy 3 of those. And you can get a lot of work done with these things. But let me just show you, and you can listen to the difference between a regular drill setting where it's just turning and the hammer drill setting where it's impact and turning. It's one of those things where you can have it described to you, but you're not going to appreciate the difference between trying to push a hole through a piece of tile with just your drill, pushing as hard as you can, and getting your hand on a rotohammer where the impact gives you a little hammer and a drill at the same time. World of difference. Perfectly controllable. I don't care what the brand is, a cordless rotohammer is nice for fine work. When I was working in Las Vegas, we were doing a few tilt-ups. I only got in on 2 or 3 tilt-ups, so I'm not an expert, and there's a lot to them. But I noticed that the company I was working for, Martin Harris Construction, had 4 or 5 of these Bosch Bulldogs out on the slab, because you've got to drill a lot of holes into a concrete slab when you're setting up tilt panels. You drill holes to receive your fasteners. And they ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. So when I moved to Oregon and began life up here as a general contractor, and I needed a rotohammer, I bought a Bosch Bulldog. The one I bought is not here, but I put a lot of hours on it. It worked great, and I ended up giving it to Nate. I found this one under a house. I told you a story about a very scary client. I was a 2nd or 3rd contractor on his job. He had horror stories about the first guys, and I realize now that I wish I could have heard both sides of the story. But I was crawling under the guy's house, and back in there in a corner was this drill. okay? The last poor sucker had left his bulldog under the house. So I'm a fan. But having said that, Brady brought his DeWalt. Good tool. Compares favorably. I think I would still buy the Bosch. It just seems more positive. The connections seem better. I mean, Bosch is hard to beat. SDS Plus, SDS shanks speak to the way that the bit connects to the motor. A Bosch Bulldog or its equivalent SDS Rotohammer will drill 98% of the holes that anybody needs to drill in concrete ever. I will illustrate that by pointing out that I've got an 1/8" bit in this Bulldog, I've got a 1" bit in this Bulldog, and you can actually power up to 1 1/8" diameters with the SDS Plus shank out of a drill just like this. That's versatility. So let me drill down just a little more about why it's sometimes this and sometimes this. It's because sometimes it's this and sometimes it's this, right? I mean, in general terms, if you're careful, you can do everything you want to do with this, but you're liable to break something. And on the other hand, you're not likely to break much, but sometimes you will exhaust yourself and never get the work done with this when you actually needed this. Same story. You can drill the same holes with either tool. This will go in farther, this will go in faster, this is more satisfying, maybe it's, I don't know, it's just better, except sometimes you only need a lighter touch. Think about that. But on the other hand, if you only have one, if you're going to the Pacific with Lewis and Clark and you can only take one tool, then this is the tool to get. So let me give a real-life application. You've got a remodel. You're adding on a bathroom, a master bedroom bathroom combination and a nice deck, okay? So the tile's up. I keep going back to tile. Only this time it's granite tiles. And you've got to put in the shower curtain. You can drill with that. Or maybe, you know, a 3/16 because you're going to attach the curtain hangers with Tapcons, all right? You can do that. And on the outside, you've got to put in a 3/4" wedge anchor, a series of them to hold down the ledger or the base plates, you know, to attach to the concrete or the masonry on the wall. When you're building your deck, you've got to drill some 3/4" holes. You're never going to get it done here. You're going to get it done here without even drawing a long breath. This, light work, inside almost every time. Hang a picture, right? I mean, it's good for this. This, anything from 1/8 inch to 1 1/8" and anything that has to happen into holes of almost any depth you want in one tool that you carry around in your truck. And then the big kahuna begins in a category kind of like this. I want to thank our friends at Oregon Tool and Supply because they loaned me this stuff. I don't own a spline shank Rotohammer, and they own several. They sell them and they rent them. So this one is just a Rotohammer. They also come in a demolition hammer model that will chisel, that will just hammer and turn, Rotohammer. But this is the whole next step up. I mean, I don't know how functionally far you could push this into solid concrete, but they even make extensions of different types, so you can go in a long ways. It's powerful enough to be a hole saw in concrete, full range of diameters. Think of the torque. Think of the abuse. And this is something I don't understand, that it's kind of a Morris taper equivalent connection between the connection to the motor and the connection to the work. How do they do that? And these things will go up, I don't know, 1.5" or 1 5/8" in diameter. You can see that this thing has worked hard. Milwaukee's the brand. I can't wait to plug this thing in and wind myself up with the cord. So here's some different options for anchors. It's not everything that's available, but it's the things that you might use. Tapcons, drill the hole, thread it in. Tighten, you drill a hole and thread that in like it's a machine screw. I mean, all the way down. These are beautiful. Wedge anchors, still useful. Drill the hole. As it tries to withdraw, this shield slides down and flares and gets a good tight hold. That's 5/8. This is 1/2 inch. This is 3/4. This is 3/4 also, I think. Yeah. And this is an example of the super heavy duty, take it to the bank, sleep soundly at night, epoxied anchored connection. In general, you use a threaded rod, whatever is specified, drill the hole about 1/8 inch bigger. This is a 1 inch piece of all thread. You would drill 1 1/8". Therefore, you know, an SDS Plus or a spline shank machine would do it. You drill a big enough hole, you clean it out assiduously. You blow it out with air and don't get the dust back in your eyes. You take a wire brush and you brush the sides, because it's a connection between the epoxy and the inside of the hole and the epoxy and the threads that makes arguably the best embedded connection that you can get if you didn't remember to cast it in place when the mud was still soft. Now these two are pretty much the same thing, except visualize this. When this is installed, you've got a nut and a washer at the surface. You can take the nut off, you can take the washer off, but you've still got the projecting bolt. And it takes a while. You've got to hammer that in. It's possible to mar it when you're installing it. It's just a little tricky. This thing, you drill the hole, you ream it out, you clean it out, and you run it in. And then if whatever the application is becomes obsolete, like maybe the basketball hoop no longer is needed because the grandkids are all in college, you can just back this out. You just pull it out and all you have is a hole. You don't have a hole with a bolt projecting. So the Titans are super fast, super convenient, and hard to mess up and removable. The wedge anchors, I think, cost a little less money. I don't know. There are reasons, but in general, I find myself doing this most of the time now. Check out the other video we have with these tools where we put all of them through their paces, real time, drill some concrete, and you can see and hear for yourself the difference in how these things perform. So this old Milwaukee core drill came over on the Mayflower, but it's still doing its job. You use core drills for drilling big holes. You can see by the circumference of that arc right there that this would swing probably maybe a 10-inch diameter core drill. Now, I don't own one. A core drill bit that size would cost probably about as much as a good-sized car payment. But the idea is you can drill holes in slabs for setting posts. You can drill holes through walls for big sewer pipe penetrations. There's just sort of no functional limit to the size hole you can punch through a masonry substrate if you've got something like this. Sometimes it's handy. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.